Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Chiseled. And why do we call it Chiseled? Because we're all work in progress. Today, I have a special guest, Diane Halfman from San Diego, California. Diane is a mother of two daughters, grandmother of four, currently married to her current husband for 10 years. She's a consultant, trainer, and podcaster. Diane utilizes her survival instincts from her work as an undercover prostitute to empower business leaders to move through crisis, manage boundaries, and not to second guess herself. She's the host of the she's the host of the Live Your Spa Life podcast. And the Spa and Spa Life stands for Seek Power Always, that divine power within you to do your deeper work in the world. Good morning, Diane. How are we today?
Good morning, Robert. Thank you for having me. Great to be
Well,
here.
welcome to the show. So, people, when we talk about undercover, people going to, right away they heard, undercover prostitute, and I hate to, I don't hate to, but I mean, let's just dig right in. Tell us about that because people are like, "What's that mean? What does it mean to be undercover in that regard?"
Yeah. So, I was on the police department and I worked uniform patrol, answered, 911 calls. But there's a certain aspect of police work where going undercover is most effective. And at the time, I was an undercover prostitute because we were hunting a serial killer. And a lot of serial killers, they target prostitutes because there isn't as much reporting. There's a lot of underreporting with that. And so, there's also a lot of copycat serial killers as well. So being on the street, it's not about who's sleeping with who, it's about who is attracted to that element, what kind of things happen. And when we arrest people for prostitution in a certain area, we can then look at, hey, if there's other crimes, robberies, assaults, other things that are going on, we can tie people to those crimes. So that was the focus.
Well, that's interesting. And I guess in that world, I mean, let me ask this question: did you ever catch the guy?
Well, yes, I was caught as part of undercover prostitution. There was a greater a team, all throughout California, and it was through undercover prostitution that he was caught. I wasn't on the arrest team, but it was part of the efforts of undercover prostitution. Is how he was caught.
Wow. Well, congratulations. And thank you for your public service for all those years. So you were in the police department from 1992 to 2002, and you did a lot there. And so now you have your Spa Life podcast, and I guess, got a lot of your skills from your work in the police department. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd never really thought that police work would be transferable into the civilian world. And, as I had retired from an injury, I had people ask me a lot about, they want to hear about the undercover stories. There's a lot of intrigue and, just police work in general. And then I started making a connection between the skills that I learned, particularly undercover, about having to trust myself in stressful situations, to be able to make quicker decisions, to really be able to move through stress, and no matter what's going on. These are the exact skills that our leaders need. And so I started working for company leaders, for entrepreneurs, for corporations that really needed that skill set to help them. So now I do consulting and training where they can utilize and take advantage of those same skills that I learned to be able to apply to their business.
That is incredible, and thank you for sharing that. So you're undercover, and how long did you do the undercover piece of? Was the whole 10 years, or just a segment of time?
Most of that time, there were times you go in and out of being undercover. There are certain, we call them 1186, which is time away from patrol, where it's dedicated to these kind of assignments.
So in training for undercover, because like if you see the TV shows, and like you're like the average person out on the street, but nobody knows you're undercover. What's the feeling like the first time you went out? Is there a like this nervous energy, like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, what if? Does that occur?
Absolutely. I mean, you really, you can train just like a lot of things in life. You can have all kinds of knowledge, but the knowing comes from actually doing and the actual personal experience. And when you start talking with people, you start experiencing it. You have people around you that this is why it's great to have training and consultants and people that help you move through, people who've done what you've done before. You're not reinventing the wheel. You're really looking at what are some of the strategies. Really relying on people giving you some some insights. I had another female police officer who had done the work before, and so she gave me a lot of insights as well. But yeah, when you're walking out there, and especially you're like, hey, there's somebody out there who wants to kill me, right? And I have no idea who that's going to be, and so you really have to be on your toes, but yet look casual and look at like you're not going to blow your cover. So it's kind of a dance to be able to be in the role, be alert, and to be able to be convincing to people that you're trying to have those conversations with.
Yeah, and I guess you're playing the role like with I'm sure there was other girls or prostitutes around, and they're seeing you as one of them, and really you're like under the scenes or behind the scenes and so on and so forth, right?
Well, actually, we have to do a street sweep of the actual, real prostitutes because they would dime us off in a minute. So we do a
Oh,
sweep of them. So it's only undercover operatives when there's an actual sting that's going on, because there's too much danger in that of them tipping off people.
okay. Well, thanks for explaining that. So now you were brought up a Catholic, right? You told me that.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I went to 12 years Catholic school.
So the Catholic girl now undercover and that ring, so to speak. Was that hard to categorize? Maybe is the better word.
Well, I think it was actually harder for my parents, particularly my dad, because the more I was undercover, as you can imagine, I wasn't using Catholic school language. Like there was a lot of things you have to, prostitution and the street language and the lingo and the things that you're, saying is very, very different. And so it was almost like learning a new language, being out there. And of course, when you're in role and you're practicing and you're doing that slips into your actual world. And so, there were quite a few times where, I slipped some language that my dad was like, I paid for that mouth to go to school, and, that kind of thing happened. So
I can
there were
imagine.
there were a few times, and there were some entertaining times too, because, my parents were also proud of me and the work that I was doing. And, there were times that they would actually get in the car with my kids in the car when they were young and drive by and kind of honk at me on the street and wave and just go like, hey, we want to say, good night kind of thing. And my detectives were like, your parents can't come by our scene. Like, why
Oh
are
my
they
gosh.
here? And so I'm just like, oh God, so I had to have a little talk to them about that one.
Wow. Any ever have any close calls?
Yes, actually, plenty. There was one time when I was on the counter by myself, and a car came rolling around the corner. I mean, it felt like a scene out of Starsky and Hutch with Huggy Bear, where two guys get out of the car with big coats and hats, and had the doors swung open, and they kind of were on either side of me, kind of going like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" Blah 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 type thing, because they owned the women of the street. And so luckily I had a detective who was really quick on his feet and had jumped around the corner and just started, bantering like, hey, that's my woman, that's my blah, blah, blah. And, in a lot more colorful language than that. But it diffused the situation, and they backed off, and they had left. But you have to definitely be able to think quickly on your feet.
So you were doing this for 10 years. You used the words earlier. You had to learn to trust yourself. Now, I got to ask the question: is it trusting yourself, and is God in here too? Like, I got to believe you got to put a lot of trust in Him that nothing bad happens to you along the way. So, is it a combination of trusting yourself and trusting God along the way?
Well, for me, I think it's one and the same. I believe,
Okay.
God's within us. We're here, and, we've all had these God moments. And, how many times have we said, by the grace of God, here I go. And, for me, having that foundation and having that trust, I believe that, it's everything, right? You don't want to have just blind faith when it comes to your safety, because you have to be trained, right? It's like that parable where, someone's like, God said, like, I sent you a plane, I sent you a train, and they're like, God, where are you? Right? He sent
Yeah,
you all of
yeah.
these things, right? To help us and to have these resources, but we've got to listen. And that's where, that intuition comes in, where we've got to hear the direction that we're going and to be able to listen. And that was really helpful in police work, is in trusting myself. I am trusting God that, whatever happens, that I'm going to make the right decision, that I'm going to help people stay safe. I'm going to keep myself safe. I'm going to come home to my daughters. It's all of those things put together. And I think that when you look at that, in the world, God gives us so many resources. We just have to ask Him to present them to us.
Well, thank you. And that's a great explanation there. So I had this little, I don't want to call it epiphany this morning, but I was thinking this about this podcast we're doing, and you were undercover, and I'm thinking, so you live this great life, and then you go undercover, which is a different life, so to speak. Do you think people live undercover lives?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I talk about this quite a bit because, I think we actually have three different lives, three different versions of ourselves. There is our public life that, people see us. It's on social media. It's the greater people that see whatever we tell them that of who we are. And then we have these private lives where, our family and our close friends, they know more about us. They know more about our story. They know about who we are. But then I think there's always an aspect of an undercover life where there's that part of us that we hope no one sees, or that they don't, really. There's an embarrassment or a shame, or there's something where we maybe don't feel as good about ourselves, or we judge ourselves, right? And so when we come from that place and we're not necessarily in alignment or congruent, then that's where it can have people feeling depressed. They can feel really not in alignment with who they are. And so the more we can, whether it is finding a trusted friend, or a coach, or somebody who you can trust that helps you kind of move through those kind of things. And one of the things I learned, and I've been into thousands of homes, in the police department, and with calls and things going on, is that the when you see people in a state of crisis, it's not their best self. It's not who they are and who they want people to have them be known as. And so we have to be in a place of forgiveness. And I believe that people have these victim experiences, but you don't have to identify yourself as a victim. We all have these things that happen in our life. And so when we give ourselves some grace and some forgiveness, and we move through those things, we can actually learn from them. And they talk about having all of our mistakes and our mess can actually become our message, where we can help other people because we've been there.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good. So and what I heard, there's three. You see it as a public life, private life, and the undercover life. And the undercover life is the piece that you don't think people want to be known, so to speak. But can't that public life, if I'm here putting on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram, and it's the public life, but can't that be really covering up who I really am?
Sure. And, in a lot of ways, I mean, I think we all want to, show our best life where it's the happy times and there are things going on. And I think that's why when somebody posts like, hey, I had a close friend or family member that passed away, or, I had a tough thing, I think a lot of people rally behind and say, hey, I'll send you prayers, and how can I help? And, because then they can recognize in people when they are vulnerable and they share these tough times, that you're a real person and that we all have these things. And even if we do just show a lot of the happy times, because I think it's also wonderful, and that's one of the great things about social media, is to show something positive and have the best light that you can have out there. Because when some people are going through a hard time, maybe it's something that makes them smile or lets them go like, maybe I can move through this quicker or have something happen. So it can go both ways, and I think that you have to have all of it to show every aspect of who you are.
Great. So now you've done this undercover work. You've retired from the police department. Well, you said you had an injury that occurred, correct?
Right.
That caused you to leave the police department, and now you start doing this podcast. Did the police work lead to the podcast?
No, actually, I had never had, when I retired from the department, I never really told people I actually was, on the department. I looked at that as that was more of my past. And as, people would hear about it, or, there would be some sort of connection, then there's the curiosity about one. I was the only woman on my squad back then. There weren't a lot of women officers, and then you add the layer of undercover on top of that. There's a lot of interest and questions and things happen. And then I started making that correlation about how that work really supported people in the civilian world. And so the podcast was really about empowerment. It was about people, no matter what was going on with them, that they really had that strength within them. And I think during crisis, and we've seen this in the world, where there so much fear comes from what other people have told them, or the media, and there's all this chicken little, the sky's falling kind of thing. And when you just step away from all of the craziness and chaos of the world, and you really, this is where prayer and contemplation and meditation. And when you really check in with yourself, you have all of those tools within you. And I think it's important to share that message of empowerment, because no matter where you go, there you are, and God is with you, and you can always access that within you. And so when you really have some challenging times, it's so great to have, a confidant or a coach or someone you can really talk to and bring that out within yourself, that that because we've all gone through hard times, and we've all, there's different levels of that. There's not a comparison of that. It's whatever your personal experience has been. But because we've gone through things that have been challenging, that is the evidence that we can move through hard things, that we can do hard things. And so when we do that, we can really rely on ourselves to be like, okay, how did I find that strength? Who is around me? What can I do? And really move with that with confidence.
So when did you decide to, like, did you hear a voice? Was there an intuition, or was there something that said, hey, you know what? I really need to do this podcast, and I'm going to call it Live Your Spa Life now. What was there a point in time you said, I need to do this?
Yeah, I had a mentor that was on a radio show, and then later was in a podcast, and she had really talked to me about how this is a great way to connect with people and to share your message on a larger scale, and to be able to have some real conversations that really reach out to people that you wouldn't normally have contact with, and you may not even know how you've impacted them. But it's a great way to give back, to inspire people, and to really have a legacy of really reaching out to people. And so, you know, the spa life, that really came out of one of my last cases, which was a kidnapping murder case. And it was the first case where I knew the child who had been murdered. And I played softball with her mother. And as you can imagine, it was very devastating to our community, to my family personally. And then you go through the trial. The person was a neighbor and was caught, and is in prison today. But there was, like, all of these things takes a toll on you. And so someone had volunteered to sponsor us to go to a place called Canyon Ranch in Tucson, which was a spa, kind of a retreat center. And I'd never been to a place like this before. And there was so much in just a short amount of time within that week, so much healing, not just from, body work, but being in nature and being able to, eat really good food and finally get some deep sleep. And really it was out of that another mentor of mine, when I had gotten back, had said, like, if you could do anything in the world, what would it be? And I said, I would live the spa life. And it was the first time I said that. And I didn't really realize the impact of what that word was. I think that was, a God moment, because it wasn't just about having a massage. It was about all of your environments. It was, how you were, spiritually and financially and in relationships, and, being in nature. And it was when you look at all the totality of that, and when you are really filling up your own cup, you then can be your best self, and you can do your best work, and you can have really great impact. And so it was later that evolved, that spa and spa life was seek power always. And it was that divine power within you to do that bigger work in the world. So, really there became so many nuances and flow between my work and police work to how this was actually part of a spiritual journey. And I was able to really utilize some of those skills to help people in their dark night of the soul, for those like, hey, my business looks great, but on the inside, I feel dead, and I'm not sure if I'm in my purpose, and, am I making the right decisions? And to really have someone that has their back while they're growing and living their life.
I like you just said, the dark night of the soul. There's a few books out there I've read on that, and I don't know if people, there's, I guess, a different context of that, but what is that dark night? Can you explain that real quick? The dark night for people.
Yeah, I think that it's a perfect storm where it feels like everything's going wrong. Like, it's maybe you have a relationship that's not working, you're having challenges with your kids, you maybe lost a job, there's a pandemic, right? There's just all kinds of things happening in the world that it feels like you can't catch a break. And it's kind of this perfect storm of where you feel like, I can't get ahead, and I maybe you're feeling despair, or you're feeling, shame for something, or you're maybe looking at your life and going, this isn't the life that I thought it was going to be. And so it feels like you're being hit from all kinds of different sides. And so that dark night of the soul is like that culmination of when all these things happen that you feel like you can't go on. Some people may feel suicidal. They may feel in a deep depression. They can't just get ahead and have a good day. And so for some people that can be, a moment, or it can be an extended period of time. But it's during those times that, it's really good to have a lifeline, to have somebody that you can turn to. And for some people, they look at, this is a time to be contemplative, to go into deeper prayer. This is where you connect with God and go, maybe this happening all at once was a way for God to get your attention, to have you slow down and actually ask him for the next step, because all of your ways are not necessarily working for you. And so when you're in that, this is where people will kind of get on their knees and be like, okay, I can't do this, God. Like I am stuck. I don't understand where I'm going or how I got here. And it's only through the grace of you that I can get through this and move through this. And so when people really go in partnership with him and really kind of give your life to listening and following that next step. And you don't need to know all the different ways. In fact, one of my favorite quotes is, take the first step, no more, no less, and the next step will be revealed. That is your relationship with God. That is like trusting that the next step will give you that information. And you will always have that next step when you ask.
That's so powerful. It is very powerful. I got chills thinking about that. It's because it's a lot of. You said we're in partnership with God, and when you're in partnership with anybody but God, there's got to be a level of trust. And you talked earlier about how you trust yourself, and it was God within you and whatnot. So the podcast, and I might be wrong here. Correct me if I'm wrong. So now you got the podcast, but you also have this consulting and training business, correct?
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about that? And I'm assuming the from the police work, the skills you learned there, and then the podcasting has helped with this training and consulting.
Yes, it just I didn't set out to do that. I had people that had reached out to me and just said, like, we know that you've been shot at, you've had, major experiences, you've been undercover, like you have learned to move through crisis situations. And, even though in people in the civilian world maybe don't aren't getting shot at, or they don't feel that impending death, when you have major decisions, when you have the responsibility for employees and other people, it can feel like a life and death moment, because you don't want to make the wrong decision. You want to be a good leader. You want to be able to make really good decisions. And so it's like any kind of muscle, you build that muscle by looking at, what kind of great decisions have you made in the past? What is the culture of the business you're trying to create? How do you want to have that culture in there? Do people feel like they can trust you, that they feel like you have the best for them, and that you want their growth, not just them being an employee or a number in their company? So when you are looking at those things, and people really were reaching out to be able to build that skill set, that resilience, to be able to move through challenging times of, downsizing and scaling and all of the things that go on, that can really take a toll on someone, and really, people are so focused on their career. That's when relationships can break down. That's when, maybe you're not spending as much time with your kids. I mean, there's a lot of things to take in account. If you are a leader of a company or an entrepreneur, the word balance kind of gets thrown out there. Really what you're looking at is harmony. Like, how can I have harmony in my life where I can bring in the things that I'm, the reason I'm working, the impact I want to do, and be able to have a life while you are building a living.
Yeah, thank you for using the word harmony. It's like I'm part of a real estate community, and we go to these seminars. And I remember one time he brought up the word, he brought up the idea of balance, right? And everybody says, "I want to live a balanced life," right? And there's a difference between the ed and the ing, because let's face it, how often is life really balanced? We're always balancing. We always got we're juggling and doing this, that, and other things. So we're always balancing. But I definitely like your word harmony there. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
So that now you also have a nonprofit. Can you tell me a little bit about the nonprofit? All this stuff is like, it's like culminating from the undercover work to the podcast, the training, consulting, and now you're giving back. Can you share a little bit about that?
Right. So we give back on several different levels. In my company, we tithe, where 10% goes to charity. I think that it's really important to know that this is part of that partnership with God, where that top part of what you bring in goes back to giving back and to helping Him. And it comes back to my undercover work and having a soft spot in my heart for people who have survived human trafficking. It's very prevalent. It's more rampant out there than people know, and in the different ways that happens. I've had a lot of the survivors as guests on my show to really share their story, to help not only empower them, but to have people really reach out locally in their company, in their community, to be able to see like how they can help in this area. So we give back in that. And then our nonprofit is called IDEA, and that's IDEA, which is the International De-Escalation Association. And that is training that we do, that part of grants and fundraising that people donate to that nonprofit allows us to do training for schools in anti-bullying, for departments, both police and fire department. With a lot of the defunding of police, fire departments have actually had to take on more of what police did in calls in things that they aren't necessarily trained for. So we've gone in and helped fire departments to know how to de-escalate a situation, how to bring peaceful resolutions, how to have conversations that help people calm down in an instant so you can actually have a conversation.
Man, and thank you. It's incredible that you're able to do that. And we talked a little bit offline about the human trafficking thing, and I think it's such a, like you said, a lot of people don't know all the, I guess, nuances of what's really going out there. So my heart and prayers goes out to that segment of people that get caught up in that. And thank you for doing what you're doing there. So Diane, I asked just about every guest this before we wrap things up. Undercover, right? So undercover, you were undercover. You're doing your thing now. Do you think there's still more things to be uncovered about Diane as she moves on in her journey? And for lack of a better word, chiseled about Diane?
Well, I hope so, right? I think that, as long as we're breathing, there are opportunities to grow and to, really help in a lot of different ways. So, my idea as far as being chiseled is being open to where God wants to direct me to. I always pray for have the one person who is meant to connect with me, who I'm supposed to help, who I'm to work with, whether it's individual or a company, have that be revealed, because whoever that person is, I want to be able to step into that service and have that happen. So I'm always open to, whatever that pivot, that change, that next person, that next experience, whatever that is going to be. And I think when we are open, that allows more room in our life, whether that's more room for God, for close relationships, for impact. So being open and willing and having, the eyes to see and the ears to hear where you go next, that is us being on our path.
Thank you. And you should usually end with that, but gosh, you said something else there about the eyes to see, the ears to hear, and you talked about intuition earlier. So this would be my last question. So are you feeling like over time? I know when I recognize the Holy Spirit's talking to me. I know it, right? I know it. And I get this feeling, and that's part of the intuition piece. Do you know it like right on a dime, or sometimes you got, is he talking to me? Or is he not talking to me? And that's about people, places, things, ideas. How does that work with you?
I think that's that's a great question, because I think that we automatically actually hear it. It's whether or not we believe it or not, right? Because this is where the second guessing comes in, where it's like we get a message, we hear something, we know it, but maybe we're not sure how it's going to happen, or maybe God didn't give us the full menu of like what it all looks like, and so we're like, oh, he couldn't possibly have meant that, and so that's where we get into the doubt and we start kind of backing down. And so there is Mel Robbins is an author who talks about the 5-second rule. And the 5-second rule really applies that within 5 seconds, if you don't move forward and go, tell me more, let me have things be revealed, then you start getting into hesitation and procrastination and second guessing, and you get further and further away from the message. So when we start receiving messages, when we start having that intuitive hit, and for some people, they feel it in, their head, their heart, their gut, you have to know where that is in your body and what that feels like, so that when it comes, you can lean into it and get more of that message. So when that happens, you want to lean in and just say, okay, I'm listening, versus that backpedaling, because the more you backpedal, the fainter the message becomes, and then that's where we get away from it. So it's really about building that muscle to lean in.
So how do you build that muscle? That was my.
Yeah. Just doing it, just listening to it, like and I think sometimes being in nature, I feel is a really great thing when you're just kind of away from other people and the noise, and you're just kind of walking. There's such majesty in the nature. And I think when we get into a place of silence, I think that's one of the challenging things to do. It's challenging for me, just to have a quiet time and to just, be in a place of listening. And I think when you're listening, that's when God knows, has our attention. And I think that's when the messages really start flowing. I think that's also why a lot of times when like you're in the shower or the car, you get these really inspirational messages, because it's the rare time when you're alone.
The quiet time, right? The quiet time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like when I asked the question about the muscle, for me, it is nature, and I do contemplative prayer. And those are the times when I'm in my head, and I'm just in awe of God and everything he's created. And I think when we do that, because to me, that's a workout in and of itself, is trying to get quiet and be in nature and be in the moment. And when we do those things and clear those frequencies, so to speak, then we can receive those good things, those good signals, those good signs, those good words, and we hear the Spirit talking to us, and that will help us better make those decisions in an instinct like you do. So, man, thank you, Diane. That is awesome. I really appreciate you being here. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, I can put the notes in there about the email address and website and all that, but share with us how people can get a hold of you if they'd like to chat with you.
Well, thanks, Rob. It's great being here with you. I so appreciate being part of this conversation, and the impact that you're doing in the world. And for people who'd like to connect with me, anywhere with my name, DianeHalfman.com is my website. On any podcast platform, you can listen to the Live Your Spa Life show. And also, Instagram, all the different type of social medias, whatever your platform or interest is, feel free to reach out in any way I can support you. I'm happy to do so.
Thank you, Diane. We appreciate having you here today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom, and thank you for your service. And until next time, everybody, let's go get chiseled.